The first crack in the wall didn't sound like a miracle. It sounded like something breaking for the last time. Mason Hale froze, his breath caught halfway between hope and exhaustion, his hand still gripping the worn-out hammer he had borrowed from a neighbor who barely knew his name. Dust fell in slow motion, drifting through the narrow beam of sunlight that slipped through the broken window of the tiny, forgotten house. For a moment, everything stood still, his life, his struggles, his doubts, held in the silence of that crumbling wall. If you believe that even the smallest act of kindness can change someone's life forever, take a second to like this video, share it, and subscribe to Acts That Matter. And tell us in the comments, have you ever been given a second chance when you least expected it? Mason hadn't always been this man, the one standing in a nearly collapsed house, counting coins before buying bread, praying his daughter wouldn't notice how little they had left. There was a time when life had structure, when mornings meant purpose and evenings meant peace. But that was before the layoffs, before the bills piled up, before his wife walked out of the door with tears in her eyes and never came back. Now, it was just him and 6-year-old Alara, whose quiet strength often felt far greater than his own. The house itself had come into his life like a strange joke. It was offered to him by a sharply dressed CEO named Victor Holden, a man whose voice carried both authority and something unreadable beneath it. Mason had met him by chance, if chance even existed, when he was doing odd jobs outside a corporate building, trying to earn enough for groceries. Victor had stepped out, noticed him, and after a brief conversation that Mason barely understood, made an offer that sounded unreal. "You can have it for $9, Victor had said calmly, as if he were talking about a cup of coffee rather than a house. Mason had stared at him, convinced it was either mockery or madness. But Victor's expression hadn't changed. No smile, no smirk, just quiet certainty. The house was old, abandoned, and far from perfect. The roof sagged like it had given up years ago, the walls cracked like dry earth, and the floors creaked under even the lightest steps. But it was shelter. It was something. And for $9, it was more than Mason could have ever dreamed of owning again. Still, something about it felt strange. Not dangerous, just unfinished, as if the house had a story it hadn't told yet. The first night inside was restless. The wind whispered through gaps in the wood, and every creak sounded like a question waiting for an answer. Alara curled up beside him, her small hand clutching his shirt, trusting him in a way that both comforted and terrified him. He couldn't fail her. Not here. Not now. Days turned into a fragile routine. Mason worked wherever he could, repairing fences, cleaning yards, fixing broken things for people who rarely looked him in the eye. Every evening, he returned to the house, slowly trying to make it livable. He patched holes, cleared debris, and swept away layers of dust that felt like years of forgotten memories. But the wall in the back room, that wall was different. It had a hollow sound to it, subtle but unmistakable. At first, Mason ignored it. He had enough problems without chasing strange echoes in old walls. But the sound lingered in his mind, tapping at his thoughts like a quiet insistence. One afternoon, as sunlight poured in through the cracked window and Alara played quietly with a broken toy she refused to throw away, Mason finally gave in. He picked up the hammer, approached the wall, and struck it once. The sound echoed deeper than expected. He paused, heart racing for reasons he couldn't explain, then struck again. This time, a piece of plaster broke away, revealing darkness behind it, not empty darkness, but something solid, something hidden. His hands began to tremble as he widened the hole. Dust filled the air, making him cough, but he didn't stop. Something inside him knew this moment mattered, even if he didn't understand why. And then, it appeared. Stacks. Neat, tightly packed stacks of money, hidden within the wall like a secret waiting decades to be discovered. Beside them were glass jars filled with coins, their metallic glint catching the sunlight like tiny sparks of hope. Mason stumbled backward, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. It didn't feel real. It couldn't be real. For a long moment, he just stood there, staring, his thoughts tangled between disbelief and fear. This kind of thing didn't happen to people like him. Not to a man who counted every dollar, who skipped meals so his daughter wouldn't have to. Ilara's voice broke through the silence, soft and curious. She asked what he found, her eyes wide with innocent wonder. Mason couldn't answer right away. His throat tightened, his chest heavy with emotions he couldn't name. Relief, confusion, gratitude, fear, they all collided at once. He knelt beside her, pulling her close, holding her like he was afraid she might disappear if he let go. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Mason sat in the dim light, staring at the hidden fortune he had carefully covered again, unsure of what to do next. Questions flooded his mind. Who had hidden it? Why was it there? And most importantly, why had Victor Halden sold him this house for $9 without mentioning any of it? The next morning, he made a decision. He couldn't keep this to himself. Not yet. Leaving Ilara with a trusted neighbor, Mason traveled back to the city, his heart pounding with every step. The towering glass building where Victor worked felt like another world, clean, polished, distant from the life Mason knew. When he finally stood before Victor again, everything felt surreal. Victor listened quietly as Mason explained, his expression unchanged, his eyes calm but deeply attentive. When Mason finished, there was a long silence. Then Victor nodded, as if confirming something he already knew. What Mason learned next would change everything. The house had once belonged to a man who had lost everything, his family, his business, his will to keep going. Before disappearing, that man had hidden his life savings within the walls, leaving behind no explanation, no trace of where he went. The property had passed through legal systems, forgotten and overlooked, until it ended up in Victor's hands. Victor had known about the house's history, but not the money itself. What he did know was something else entirely. He had seen Mason. Not just a struggling man, but someone who hadn't given up despite everything. Someone who still showed kindness, who still worked hard even when the world gave him nothing in return. And that was why he offered the house. Not as charity, but as a chance. Mason stood there, overwhelmed, struggling to find words that felt too small for what he was feeling. Victor simply told him that sometimes, life hides things where only the right person will find them. Mason returned home a different man, not because he suddenly had wealth, but because something inside him had shifted. For the first time in years, hope didn't feel fragile. It felt real. He used the money carefully, wisely. He repaired the house, turning it into a safe, warm place where laughter slowly replaced silence. He invested in small opportunities, building stability piece by piece. Most importantly, he made sure Ilara never felt the weight he had carried for so long. But he didn't forget where he came from. Mason began helping others, quietly, without seeking recognition. Fixing homes for those who couldn't afford it, buying groceries for families who needed it, offering the same kind of second chance he had been given. Because he understood something now. The greatest treasure wasn't hidden in the walls. It was hidden in the choice to care. Before this story ends, if it touched your heart even a little, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Acts That Matter. Your support helps spread stories like this, stories that remind us what truly matters. And tell us in the comments, what would you do if you found something like this? As the sun set one evening, casting a golden glow over the once broken house, Mason stood outside watching Ilara laugh as she ran through the yard. The walls that once held secrets now held memories. The silence that once felt heavy now felt peaceful. Life hadn't just changed. It had begun again. And somewhere, in ways no one could fully explain, a simple sentence still echoed through it all. You can have it for $9. Sometimes, that's all it takes. One moment. One chance. One act of kindness. To change everything.